Hi. How are ya?
Good. How are you?
Good. Happy Monday.
Yeah, thanks. You too.
Yeah, it's like, okay, am I ready to start again? I don't know. Crazy weekend. So, how are you doing today?
Good.
Good. I haven't heard from you in a few days.
I know. Kind of dropped off there.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell me about your weekend. How was that?
Um, I don't remember.
You were busy then.
Yeah,
I
I
was
think it was good.
Yeah, painting a bathroom. Not fun.
Ew, yuck.
I always think it would be easier than it is, and then something always goes wrong, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. This is hard. Yeah.
Yeah.
But other
It's
than
not the actual painting, it's the prepping and the cleanup. That's the worst.
yeah, the worst for us this time was trying to caulk around the bathtub, around the, we did this new tile, and yeah, we didn't do a great job. So we just ended up making a mess than it should have been. And yeah, so today I have to go back and like redo stuff to try to fix the mess that we made. And yeah,
Oh, man.
so what should have been a one-day project is turning into a several-day project. You know? But, well, good. So you had some good successes last week.
Yeah.
Tell me about those.
Good. Um, it was nice to when you were it was interesting when you were telling me that you wanted to hear how I felt at the end, like if was it worth it and did I enjoy it more, or that kind of thing. In my head I was like, I'm not gonna like it. I went in with this attitude like
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, but I didn't. It was refreshing and freeing, and that's what I'm looking for, and that's exactly what it was. It was like, wow, this is okay, like, I can do this, and it didn't feel bad. And
It's so amazing how when we're in that mindset of really struggling, it feels like eating this way will totally be depriving ourselves.
Yep.
Right? It feels like it's going to be the same feeling as a diet.
Yep.
That's exactly how it feels. Yeah.
Yep.
But then it is amazing how when you actually do it, the first thing you think is, why don't I do this all the time?
Mm-hmm.
And yet then you struggle again.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, crap, this is going to be really hard again. And just, we go back and forth in this mindset. And I love something that Janine Roth says. She says, we remember and then we forget again.
Mm-hmm.
And we remember and
Yep.
then we forget, and then we remember. And it's like, you just don't beat yourself up again when you struggle. Then you're just like, oh yeah, okay, I can remember again. And the best way to remember is just do it again.
Mm-hmm.
And get back on, feeling
like, yeah, last night I forgot again, but it was okay. I was like, it's okay, I'm gonna do that, not beat myself up, and moving on.
you.
Yeah,
that's huge.
Yeah,
that is very, very huge.
It feels so good.
Yeah, it is amazing. And then when you're in that mode, when you're in that place of kind of a healthy balance, you realize, oh, this is what God wanted us to do.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Everything's so clear when you're in that mode. And when you're not in that mode, everything seems so incredibly foggy.
Yeah.
Right?
My niece was talking to me yesterday and telling me, or Saturday, and she was talking about how they've just been eating so badly, and so now they're cutting out carbs and cutting out sugar, and I just was so sad for her. But I just I can't say anything because we don't listen when we're in that.
It's really hard. I mean, sometimes you can feel inspired to share with somebody what works for you or whatever, but yeah, I totally get it. It's like you can't preach to anybody else, and
Mm-hmm.
and everybody's in a different place, and
Yep.
It's hard to, sometimes you need those places to get where you need to go.
Yeah, it's like an alcoholic. You have to hit bottom several times.
Yeah.
In order to, and you have to want to do it yourself. Nobody can tell you what to do. You can't, nobody can put you in an institution and you're still gonna fail or whatever.
Yeah. I think it's kind of like having married children. You know, when they're younger, you can reach out, tell them exactly what you want them to do and how to do it and blah, 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 blah. Once they're up and grown and married, you may know exactly what they're doing wrong. You may know exactly what they need. And yet until they ask, your advice will not be taken anyway.
Oh,
And it's only resented at that point, right?
Mhm.
It's just resented. So it's like, my goal is to try to live it in such a way that someday people will say, whoa, how'd you do that? And I could say, I gave up dieting and this is, this is how I did it. But I'm not to that point yet where people are going to look at me and say that, right? So
Right.
I just want to work on living that way and being that way. And if anybody ever wants to know how I became more peaceful about this, then I want to be prepared to share that.
Mm-hmm.
But until they ask, doesn't do you much good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so fascinating. So did you have a chance to read the next chapter, chapter 7?
I think I'm into part of it. Let me look and see where I am. Yeah, I'm like halfway through.
Okay, where did you stop?
I'm on page 1.
81. Okay. All right. Well, this chapter, even though I think we should still talk about it and cover it, I know that this isn't as challenging of an issue for you as far as being afraid of certain types of foods, right?
Mm-hmm.
At least I know in the past you've expressed that you weren't too afraid of, having a cookie, or that you don't have any specific foods that you're like, I'm never eating this.
Yeah,
Right?
not anymore.
Yeah.
I put all those rules aside and eating whatever I want and trying not to have those rules.
Okay, that's good. So let's just kind of go over it quickly then,
Okay.
kind of hit some of the highlights and stuff. And then at the end, I want to share with you some thoughts I've been having to go along with this more on the faith side of stuff.
Okay.
Here where I can see what I'm doing. Okay, so yeah, this part is all about, giving yourself unconditional permission to eat. And I think that phrase is a little bit scary the way they word it. Unconditional permission to eat. I know that strikes terror in me when you word it that way. And so what do you think of how would you define what they mean by unconditional permission to eat?
I don't know. Unconditional.
Because even they're giving you guidelines. So what do they mean by unconditional?
I have no idea. When I think of that term, I think of unconditional love. So you're loving someone no matter what. So I don't
Yeah.
know that has.
I think what they're trying to say, and here's how I take it. You tell me if you see it any differently. I think of it as you always have permission to eat. Like there's no restraint around you. You are in 100% control of yourself, right?
Mhm.
And so like we said, if there's a situation where you want to eat and you're not hungry, you have permission. You're not breaking a rule. There's nothing to fight against, right? There's no sense of I can't do this or I can't do that. No, you can do whatever you want, right? And so I think they're trying to get rid of this constant sense of, well, I can do this except this, or I can do this but that. And then we constantly have this feeling like we're not allowed to do something, or I'm too fat to eat too much of that, or I can't, so they're trying to say like take off all the rules.
Okay.
And take full control of the fact that you have all agency over what you eat.
Okay.
So I think that's kind of how they're saying it. Now, they also say, and I don't remember if it's in this chapter or the next chapter, we'll see in a minute, where they say, don't get caught in the trap of thinking I can eat whatever I want, whenever I want. So that can seem like a flip side of unconditional permission to eat.
Yeah.
But I think it is unconditional permission, meaning, well, you can eat whatever you want, whenever you want. You totally can. But don't think that you're intuitively eating at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so recognize that you have the choice. Do you want to intuitively eat or do you not want to intuitively eat? Do you, but recognizing that it may or may not be healthy for you. It may or may not be leading you towards your goals, but don't put some sort of rule on yourself that makes you just feel like you're deprived all the time.
Yeah.
you know. So to me, that's how I get it. But I do think it's a scary phrase, the way the way they worded it. And I have been one of those people that, when trying to eat intuitively, it's very easy for me to get trapped in the, well, I'm not dieting anymore. I can do whatever I want. And, you know, and then I find myself getting miserable because I get out of control, or that I'm not, you know, really listening to my body on what feels good and what doesn't. I'm not, you know, I get in the old mode, and I can use the excuse of intuitive eating for my excuse for why I want to do whatever I want to do.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting balance there, isn't it?
Yeah.
I love this this first part where they talk about the biosphere, where the scientists lived for 2 years.
Yeah.
I thought, how interesting. So here they had everything they needed. No, they weren't deprived as far as,
And they didn't have any problems before with food, they said.
yeah,
They're just
no
like
problems.
normal people.
Yeah, and then I thought it was interesting too that they craved air, right? Just air, like fresh air. They were going crazy. And yet I'm sure they had air circulation constantly pumped in there so that they had all that they needed. I'm sure technically it was fresh air, right?
Mm-hmm.
Pumped in from the outside. But isn't that interesting that they would just crave, like, oh my gosh. I bet when they first opened the door and went out, that's probably the first thing they wanted.
Oh, yeah.
Before the food, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So very, very interesting. So have you ever found yourself like experiencing cravings for something other than food?
Yes, like right now, sunlight, because we've had this fog.
Oh my gosh, that's a great example. That's a great example. In the winter,
Derek and I went up to Tahoe on Saturday,
uh,
and it was beautiful and sunny up there, and we didn't realize what we were missing until we went up there. I was like,
yeah,
this is what we needed. It was just
yeah.
amazing.
And yet in the middle of summer, when you have plenty of sunlight at your own house, you can go up to Tahoe and be like, you might then focus on, oh, the lake's pretty, the
Yes.
trees are pretty. We wouldn't even notice the sunshine.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's true. In the middle of winter, you're like, holy cow, we need some sunshine. That's why spring feels so good.
Yeah.
Oh, look, it's sunny outside. Let's put on our flip-flops. And, you know, it doesn't matter if it's 40 degrees. Let's go outside.
Yep. Yep.
That's a great example. I know for me, craving just warmth. Like, you know,
yeah.
it just, your toes are, like the other day I went out and a week ago Sunday, I had to shovel the snow because Ken's back is really bad right now. And I wore I had boots on, but they were suede boots. And so they got wet. And then I went right to church and my feet were wet the whole time at church. And all I could think of through all of church was, I want dry, warm feet. That's it, you know? So it's interesting. It's like anything that we're deprived of, we just start craving. And then on page 76, they say something that I starred and highlighted because it really applies to me. It says, if you're someone who's experienced deprivation in areas outside of food, such as love, attention, material wants, etc., the deprivation connected to dieting may be felt even more intensely by you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that rang true for me because, like I said, I started binging and overeating on food long before I ever dieted. Like, you know, many, probably 10 years before I started dieting. And, but that's what I was trying to fill was that sense of void that I had from my dad leaving and my mom having to work all the time and all that stuff. And so I think that is why it has been so difficult and so long coming and me trying to make these transformations, because remember me telling you that when I get like hungry, sometimes it makes me feel emotionally like uptight, not just physically hungry.
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe that's why. Maybe I associated that feeling of being hungry to me felt negative as a kid. And it felt like something that had to be fixed, just like any other negative feeling in my life. And the only way I knew how to fix every negative feeling was with food.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, that's where that came from. Does that relate? Do you relate to that phrase at all?
Well, I think it has to do with the whole emotional side of food, and we have those feelings, and so we eat. So yeah, totally.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, if I feel sad or whatever, I'm gonna, that's a deprived feeling. I'm having a pity party. I'm gonna eat.
Yeah. 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 It's amazing how we get them tied together.
Mm-hmm.
The Last Supper eating thing, I know we all relate to that.
Mm-hmm.
That sense of it's going to be taken away, therefore I must eat it all now. In fact, we just talked about it the other day, that feeling of competition, right?
Yep.
People in large families, or this
Yeah.
time of year, it can be really
Yeah.
tough because people are making desserts they only make this time of
Right.
year. Special
And
foods.
this will be the first. This is the first time that I've experienced this in many years because I wasn't eating sugar for so many years. So I
Wow.
really have to be aware and calm down and okay, I can try this, but I don't need to eat it all because it'll be there again next year. Or I remember I don't know if it was you telling me or whoever was like, you can take that with you home. If you're not hungry, just put it, say, I really like some of this. I'm just not hungry now. Can I take it home with me?
Mm-hmm.
Practice that too.
Yeah, that, and I mean, especially in our LDS society, people are happy to give recipes. And I think, why do I only make this once a year?
Yeah.
Like, that's so dumb. I could make this anytime I want. It takes just, it's not even usually something very difficult, but it's a tradition, right?
Right.
And I think, okay, can I really not make peppermint brownies any other time of year?
Right.
Pretty sure I can. Oh yeah, we have definite mindsets and ways we do things, and then we get stuck in those. Did I tell you about my friend and the Twinkies?
Yes.
Yeah,
When they left, she
yep.
stopped, and then
Oh
she realized she didn't even like them. Yeah.
yeah. But she panicked, like when Hostess said we're out of business, and she was like, "No more Twinkies," and she hadn't had a Twinkie in years. No Twinkie in years, and yet suddenly you have to have a Twinkie.
Yeah.
It's funny how as soon as we think something's going away, then we want it badly. Yeah, so true. Let's see. Let me just skip ahead here. Okay, all right. Here's some examples. I wrote down some examples for me of when it's totally been true of that perception of food being taken away can make you feel like you have to binge on it, even if it doesn't actually get taken away. So for me, I was thinking about, every diet I've been on and how it always led to, it'd be interesting if you could go get a video of every time you were about to go rejoin Weight Watchers, what did you eat the day before? Right. Or one of the worst examples was when I decided to do a juice fast for 100 days.
Oh.
Yeah. And what I did is I said I would, and I watched don't watch it, some Netflix video where this guy did it, and he ate McDonald's for like a month and he gained like 36 pounds, and then he did juicing and he lost it all and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And I thought, that looks great. I can do that. I like juice, no big deal. So I decided for breakfast and lunch, I'll do juice only. And then I'll eat a normal dinner and I'm giving up all sugar. That was my diet for 100 days. And guess what? I lost a lot of weight at first, right? Always do. And it wasn't bad at first. And then I started getting diarrhea because you can't drink that much juice of just fruits and vegetables without getting diarrhea. And it started getting worse and worse. And at first I loved it because I'm like, look, I'm not getting any cravings. My sugar cravings are gone. I feel great. You know the whole story. Yeah. And then as the 100 days went on and on and on and on and on and kept getting closer, I just kept thinking, well, it wouldn't hurt to have one piece of cake, right? It's a piece of cake. Now I didn't do it. I waited till the 100 days, but I started thinking about it. Mm-hmm. And I started like, okay, this is like, really, what is a couple hundred calories of a piece of cake going to ruin your life? In fact, I want to be moderate. When I'm done with this, I don't expect to do this forever. I'm just doing it for 100 days. And so, when I'm done, I want to make sure that I can have a, Sunday dessert or whatever. I was totally planning to be moderate when this was over. And the minute the 100 days was over, guess what the first thing I wanted was?
Chocolate cake?
Any kind of sweets, right? Mm-hmm. And I could not stop. I was like, I was totally out of control. And I more than made up for the 100 days and whatever I had lost in that time period by, totally going for it. I don't remember what I ate the day before I started the juice fast, but I could bet it would be interesting to see. And then I thought it was interesting how they said that for a lot of people, they say that Last Supper eating is one of their favorite parts of dieting.
Yeah.
It's like this entitlement. And I kind of chuckled because I had never thought of it like that, but that is so true.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you were at church and they had a potluck and there were desserts and you were getting 2 or 3 desserts, you could easily justify that to everybody on the table by saying, yeah, I'm starting my diet tomorrow. I'm totally going to enjoy this. And everybody would be like, oh my gosh, yeah, here, have some of mine too. Right? Yeah, they would. They'd be totally supported.
My friend and I were just talking about that this morning, how if you go to a party and you choose not to eat, or if you're on a diet or whatever and you don't want to eat, everyone is all up in your business and why are you eating and you should be eating. But yet if you go to a party and you get a plate full of cookies, everyone is like, awesome, nobody says anything. That is so wrong. Like, what is
and I find it depends on who you're with and what culture you're in. So you might also have another group of people, and I have one group of people like this in my life, who if you were to show up at a party and eat nothing, and you said, I'm really not hungry, I'm not going to eat, they'd be like, oh, that's so awesome. You're so strong. I could never do that. Right. Mm-hmm. Or some people who would be like, yeah, finally join the club, stop eating so much. I have a couple of people like that in my life. And then if you did the opposite and you had the plate of cookies, they wouldn't say anything, but you could see it in their face. They'd be judging you the whole time.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that, the bottom line is everybody thinks that it's their business to tell you what and when to eat. Mm-hmm. And we take our social cues from everybody around us. Mm-hmm. Well, are they going to be okay with what I'm eating right now? And then what we do is we go home and we eat what we really want.
Yep.
And 5 times more, because now we're beating ourselves up because whatever, So it's so interesting trying to change this mindset, this whole, like, what you think of me is none of my business. And what do I think right now? What do I feel? And that, I think that goes back to the unconditional permission to eat, is that, no, this is your life. Only you can decide what you want, when you want it, how you want it, what's good for you, what's not good for you. And I think that's, at least for me, that's a huge challenge, even still sometimes, to feel like people are going to judge me for what I'm eating.
Yep.
And that's when I want to secretly eat, because I don't feel like being judged, right? Yep. Yeah, nobody likes being judged. So, and then it's interesting because, these little Last Supper eatings and things that we have like that, or, being on that 100-day juice fast, as soon as I start eating sweets and I don't control it, and I just start, eating sweets for days on end, then that just serves as proof in my head that I couldn't be trusted all along. Right? We never blame the diet. We never blame the process. We blame ourselves constantly. Oh, see, I can't handle it. Yeah. So interesting. See, I'm addicted to sugar, or see, whatever. Yeah, interesting. Okay, and then we have rebound eating. And I thought that was interesting that they call it rebound eating, but she just lists those, what she calls the subtle forms of rebound eating, which is food competition, which we've talked about, returning home syndrome, where you're gone for a long time and you come back and you want your favorites. Like you go to mom's house and you want whatever mom makes.
Yep.
Right? Or like when we lived in Japan, oh, holy cow. There was so much I wanted to eat when I got back.
Yep.
I lived there for 1 year and I just craved all American food. Or just say anti-Japanese food. That's what I craved. Even my daughter, who is in Chicago right now, she's only been gone since middle of July, and she lives in America still. She has tons of stuff around her, but she has made a list on her phone of all the places she's going to eat when she gets here, and the things she can't get there that are driving her crazy, because it's that natural. When you feel like you can't have something, there's any sort of restriction, it's all you want. And so we want to take that unconditional permission to say, there is no restriction. I can do whatever I want. I can eat whatever I want. So we finally get rid of that stupid drive for it, right? It talks about the empty cupboard, people who have really struggled. They gave the example of the woman whose parents worked all the time, and left her home alone, and they didn't grocery shop, and they went eating without her and stuff, and how she just really struggled. I know when my kids come home from college, they totally raid my fridge and my pantry and stuff, looking for whatever I've got. People in captivity, depression. Were your grandparents still around? Were they through the Depression?
They were. They're not around anymore, but
yeah. I remember my husband's grandmother would still wash tinfoil
Mm-hmm.
and paper plastic bags and stuff like that.
Yep.
You know, she just could not stand that we were throwing it all away, you know.
Yep.
But there's that, if you don't eat it all, you're wasting it kind of
Yep.
attitude. So she would rather have you be stuffed to the gills than throw something away.
Right.
Then the things like you feel are once in a lifetime or the last chance to ever have them. And then she goes on in this book, they go on to talk about how, okay, so with all of this, how is dieting even possible? If there's such a rebound thing of eating, how could we even diet in the first place? Why was it even possible? And they mentioned that dieters adapt, right? They change their mindset and they're responsive to inner cues for a while until it just builds up and builds up and builds up. I used to feel like it was like kind of a dam and the pressure would just build and build and build. And at first it wasn't bad at all, right? And then as it builds, you're just like gonna explode.
Yeah.
And there was a part of me, this sounds really psychologically messed up, but there was a part of me that wanted to binge so that I could get rid of that pressure and be back to where I didn't care anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted that pressure to be gone.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounded really weird to say, well, I'm going to screw up all my goals so that I don't have this craving to screw up my goals anymore. But that's kind of how I felt. And then talking about restrained eaters, right? People who just restrain themselves in any way, shape, or form. And one of my favorite parts of this entire book, what page is this on? I got to look at my notes. It's the what the hell effect. Did you read that?
Mm-hmm.
I love that because I'm like, that is pretty much, I did that.
It's on 80, like right in the middle of the page.
Oh, yeah. Honestly, I have to admit, I'm incredibly guilty of that.
Yeah.
And even today, if I struggle, oftentimes it's for that reason. Because you don't want somebody else telling you what to do. For me, the biggest challenge is feeling judged by other people, right? In that case. And feeling like I want somebody else on the outside to believe in me and to give me support and to make it easier for me. And so if they don't, I want to blame them and I want to use them as an excuse to just give in and not worry about it. And totally blame them. Well, if they were more supportive, this would be so much easier. Mm-hmm. That's the mantra going on in my head at that moment. But yeah, interesting. Have you struggled with that kind of thing?
Probably.
Probably.
Sure.
I struggle with everything. Well, I like the little study that they talked about right after that, where they're on page 81. Well, 80 and bottom of 80 and 81, where they go into the studies where they talked about, and they said, I like where they tell people that the study is about one thing when really it's about another, so that they can't screw up the study, right? So just the summary of it is, so a short 10 questions test called the restraint scale to determine how restrained eaters they are, okay? Says it includes questions to determine the frequency of dieting, the history of weight loss and gain, weekly weight fluctuations, emotional effects of weight fluctuations, effects of others on eating, obsessive thinking about food, and feelings, guilt feelings about eating. So I think it's interesting. I would like to see how they give those questions without them realizing that this is associated with this study. So they probably give those questions in one area to the university and then make them think that this ice cream study is completely not related and that they don't know anything about that. That's all I can figure. And then that's when they gave them like the milkshakes, and they gave one person one milkshake and one person two milkshakes, one person three milkshakes. They did that for lots of people. And without fail, the people who were dieters, if they were given, the more milkshakes they were given in advance, the more ice cream they ate later. Right? Because it was like, what the hell, I've screwed up my diet anyway, I might as well go for it. And I loved how they set it up so that they gave them so much ice cream available of the flavors that you could eat tons and tons and not even make a dent. so that they knew that they could eat as much as they wanted and people wouldn't really know how much they ate. So they had to set it up in a way that they would feel free to do that. And then those who were not dieters, the more ice cream they gave them in the first place, the less ice cream they ate later. And I thought that is just fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating. So yeah, just that perception that we're blowing it, we're screwing it up, we've already messed it up. Therefore, let's take off the restraints, right?
Yep.
Then they talked about the pudding, where they gave some people low calorie pudding and some people high calorie pudding, but of all those groups, they split them in half. So they told half the low calorie pudding people that it was high calorie and half of them that it was low calorie. And they did the same with the high calorie pudding people, told half of them it was low, told half it was high. Same thing. It was about the perception. If they felt like they were breaking their diet, they ate more. If they felt like they were dieting, they did better. And those who didn't dieting at all, that didn't affect them. So very, very interesting. And then you saw the seesaw. Did you get to the seesaw syndrome, guilt versus deprivation? Well, this makes sense. Excuse me. I'm still getting rid of this darn cold. Talking about, so, if this is your seesaw and you have guilt on one side and deprivation on the other, as soon as we start to diet, the deprivation gets worse and worse. It gets higher. But at the same time, our guilt gets lower. So we're feeling good because we don't feel so guilty. And that's why at the beginning of the diet, we're feeling pretty good on all sides because the guilt's going down, which feels great. And we don't have a lot of deprivation feeling yet because it hasn't been that long. And then as time goes on, we feel better and better about ourselves guilt-wise, but the deprivation part goes higher and higher and higher. And then after some, like we said, the pressure builds until we cave and we have something that we're depriving ourselves of. And so we don't feel as deprived anymore, but the guilt starts going up. And then because we have all the guilt, we keep eating that and we feel less and less deprived and more guilty until now we're like this. We have tons of guilt, no deprivation anymore. And then we like, crap, I got to do something about this. I need to go on another diet. So then we have less guilt and the deprivation starts to build and we just go back and forth. So they're saying, well, just like on a seesaw, the only way to stop playing the game is get off the seesaw. Stop dieting.
Yeah.
Right? You have to stop binging, stop dieting, just get off altogether. Yep. And that's the key, is what they said at the beginning, the unconditional permission to eat. So their definition of what unconditional permission to eat is found just after where you stopped. For some reason, I stopped writing page numbers on my notes. I'll figure it out in just a minute. But where the seesaw syndrome is.
83.
Thank you. There we go. Okay, so at the bottom of that page, the key to unconditional eat says getting rid of the idea of good and bad foods, right? So that's unconditional, meaning there's nothing on my I can't have list. Eating what you really want. And stop making food deals like, well, I can eat this today and then tomorrow I'll diet. Well, I can eat this for lunch, but I have to go take my dog for a walk after that. Stop making those deals. And when you make it so that you can choose anything, there's no deprivation side, then there's no need to have a guilt side.
Yeah.
Right?
To get off of that seesaw.
Yeah, exactly. And then, you'll definitely want to finish this chapter because the next section is the process of, okay, so then how do you find peace? How do you actually get off the seesaw? It's a great analogy, but how do you do it in your real life? And it talks about, first of all, allowing all foods into your life, and when you do that and that, like we say, chocolate has the same kind of emotional connotation as a peach, you'll know that you're allowing all foods into your life. But that's hard. And it's hard not to make it a moral issue. In fact, I was just thinking about this early this morning. There's a great scripture I was reading in 3rd Nephi where it talks about that we can have a remission of our sins through Christ. And I am a big wordsmith. I love the meaning of words. And we think of remission of sins as just being like the horrible things that you're doing and, you can be forgiven of them. But what it really means, if you have cancer and it goes in remission, that means it's stopped growing. It stopped killing you, right? It's not being a threat to you any longer. And sin is not always a moral issue. Sin is not always you're breaking a commandment or you're being a horrible person or, whatever, your character's flawed. Sin literally means without, right? It's the Latin root of the word without. And so without the Spirit. And I know that when I forget, and I start using food for the wrong reasons, I do feel separated from the Spirit. Now, that doesn't mean I'm a horrible sinner, right? Sorry, my husband needs to run in and grab his computer, but he's so cute. He just texted me to make sure that was okay. You just tell him it's okay. He can come grab it.
Oh, good. I can meet him.
Oh, have you never seen him?
No.
Well, you will in a minute, apparently. But, and so it's interesting because I pray for a remission of my sins when it comes to food, because what that means to me is I'm praying for help to have those old ways of thinking stopped, the ways of thinking that separated me from the Spirit, but not thinking of it in terms of, oh, I'm a sinner. This makes me a horrible person. This is a bad thing. Hey, Kenya, say hello to Missy.
Hi, Missy.
Hi.
What's it?
Missy.
Mitzi. Hi, Missy.
I told her you had to come get your computer. She's like, oh, good, I can meet him. Never met him. Mitzi and I have been friends for a couple of years at least.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Well, good. I hope you're all enjoying your time together, and Becky's pretty awesome.
Yes, she is. Nice to meet you.
My interruption, and
That's okay.
I do great things.
Yeah.
See you, babe.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Anyway, so can you see the difference between, for me, the difference between being separated from the Spirit and an actual morality issue?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's not like God's saying, okay, you've broken my commandments. And a lot of people take it to mean that, where I'm a horrible person because I know I shouldn't be doing this, and I don't feel the Spirit, therefore I'm a bad person, or this is a bad thing. It's like, no, we're just working on becoming closer to Heavenly Father. And there are certain things that make that difficult.
Right.
And so for me, that's kind of how I look at that. Okay. They go into that example of, when you used to think foods were bad foods and you'd have them just on special occasions or when you gave in or whatever. And then when you get rid of that, how that changes. I had a really interesting experience. I may have shared this with you. I don't know, about going for avocado egg rolls at Cheesecake Factory. Yeah. And it was so interesting. I was in such a great intuitive eating mode, and I realized I don't like this anywhere near as much as I thought it did.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as I was able to get rid of that good and bad thing.
Yep.
But until then, it's like your brain is just screaming, you're breaking a rule, you're breaking a rule, you're breaking a rule. And all you can think is, well, do it quick because I'm going to have to pay attention to it again in a minute.
Yeah.
And I don't want to pay attention to it again. And then the fears that hold us back. I think this is powerful. At least I relate to these a lot. The things that keep us from giving ourselves unconditional permission.
So sorry, I keep moving. I'm trying to get my laptop plugged in, and I'm having.
I figured that's what you were doing.
Okay.
No big deal.
Got it.
No big deal. So first of all, it talks about how, being able to legitimize food takes away its power, right? It just loses that draw over your life. And you've experienced that. I've experienced that. We just have to remind ourselves when it feels like it's taken its power back, right? So the first fear, of course, is I won't stop eating on page 85. That's the hugest fear, is I'll just keep eating and eating and eating. And sometimes we do things that seem to prove that correct.
Mm-hmm. And
that's the scary part. But they talk about food habituation, right? So you're going to read about this part where the truth is that they've done study after study after study. They've proven that when we are around something a lot, which they call habituation, whatever it is loses its draw for us. So if you have a great dinner one night and you have it for leftovers the next day, it may taste great to you the next day. If you have it for leftovers again the next day, starts to lose its appeal, no matter how great it still tastes. If you have to eat it a third day after that, you're thinking, oh my gosh, we've got to get rid of these leftovers. I got to eat something else, right? Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter how delicious it was. That's habituation.
Okay.
Or if you've ever been on a cruise. Have you been on a cruise?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, so you have that all you can eat food.
Yep.
And the very first day, how much do you eat?
Lots.
Lots, because it's like, oh my gosh, there's this and there's that and there's whatever. And you taste it all, you have it all, you're so excited. Second day, it's still pretty cool. By like the 7th day, you're like, I'll have a little bit of this, have a little bit of that. That wasn't so great yesterday. It looked good, but it wasn't really as good as I thought, that's habituation. And so that fear that we'll never stop eating is just inaccurate. Right? Anytime we have access to something regularly, we don't want it as much. One of my most recent examples is we went and played M&M bowling. Have you ever done that? I took our grown kids to bowling lane, and you take M&Ms and you decide ahead of time what each color of M&M means for how you will bowl. So like yellow may mean you have to bowl left-handed, and green may mean that you have to sit on the floor and do it, or it may be a granny style or backwards, or we come up with all sorts of crazy stuff. So you had to stop at the store because we didn't decide until we were on the way that we were going to do M&M bowling. And the only store nearby was Costco. So we got a thing of M&Ms, like a huge, I bet it has at least 8 to 10 cups of M&Ms in it. And so we got to bowling, we opened it up, and we all snacked on M&Ms the entire time, right? Me included, all just M&M after M&M after M&M after M&M. By the time we were done, we were like, I'm really sick of M&Ms. And it has sat in our cupboard now for a month. And I think I've had some maybe once in that time period. I'm not sure if anybody else has opened it up at all since then, because we have massive access and we had all we wanted and you're done. Right. Now, if I had went and bought a little package of M&Ms for the bowling thing and said, okay, so don't eat any of these because we're playing them for the game, and when we're done, we'll share them. Right. Then how would they have felt about M&Ms?
They would want them.
I wish we had more M&Ms.
Yeah.
Right? Then suddenly you want it. So it's just so interesting. It's so basic, and yet we still convince ourselves, if I give myself permission to eat, I will never stop.
Yes.
We know logically that's just not true. On page 86, the third paragraph, honestly, I think may be the most important paragraph of the whole book. And I've got it starred and underlined and circled in my book because I think this sums up what we're really looking at. So it says, the only way that you will come to believe that you will be able to stop eating is to go through the food experience, to actually eat. It is the only way you can convince yourself that it's true, right?
Yeah.
And then it says, that's why we're fond of the word process. This is not about knowledge of food, but rather rebuilding experiences with eating. Rebuilding experiences with eating. You cannot have an experience through knowledge. Rather, you need to go through it bite by bite. And that's why I truly think that should be like the opening paragraph of the book, the closing paragraph of the book, and perhaps put on every single chapter of the book. Because it's like you said, last week, you logically knew that what I was saying was true. If I eat when I'm not hungry, or if I'm eating when I'm a little hungry, I'll enjoy it more. If I eat what I like, I'll enjoy it more. If I stop when I'm not stuffed, I'll enjoy it more. Logically, that made sense to you. But what did your gut tell you before you did it?
That's not going to work.
Garbage, right? Your head said this will work. Your gut said you're an idiot, right?
Yep.
And so you had to have the experience, and now you're like, oh, that's cool. But it wasn't the be-all, end-all experience. It's not like we suddenly switched in one meal and now we've totally overcome all the past stuff, that's there. But we had one more positive experience with food. And then the next positive experience builds on that. And the next positive experience builds on that. And pretty soon, I think our heads will always try to tell us, sure would feel good to eat a bowl of ice cream right now. I don't know if that will ever shut up completely. But I do believe that if we have enough experiences on the positive side, that we know for a fact what really works, it's easier to remind yourself, oh, that's that old voice again. That is such a liar. And I know I'm happier doing this. So, okay, what will actually make me happier right now?
Yeah.
And I think that's just that process of getting that experience, that new eating experience, bite by bite. I love that. I love that. And then they asked the question about, can you be addicted to specific food? And then they're going to talk about that at the end of the chapter on page 92, which we'll go over. And then the last thing, or not last, sorry, I shouldn't say last, but fear number 2 is that pseudo permission, like, yeah, but I've tried that before, right? I've tried that before. It just didn't work for me. I tried giving myself permission to do anything, but as soon as I had I had toffee, well, I ate the whole thing. I can't do that. And I love how they explain this. They call it pseudo permission. They think they've given themselves permission to eat, but they still ate out of control. So they, feel like they can't trust themselves. But most people don't really give themselves permission to eat. They don't give themselves unconditional permission to eat. So the food is being eaten with the sense of temporarily breaking the rules, right? Okay, it doesn't matter. I can do this. But in their gut, they feel like, okay, I'm breaking a rule, but I'm just not going to think about it, right? Or with that little voice, you eat something, you get that little voice that says, you shouldn't eat that. You shouldn't eat that. You shouldn't eat that. And so the minute they touch the food with their tongue, they start feeling guilty. They feel like they should be limiting the food. So they're still physically eating it, but they are mentally on a diet.
Yeah.
Right. And I get that, because I don't think you can just suddenly give yourself unconditional permission and have that work. That also is a process of try it, work on it, see how it works, try it again, see on it, work on it, see how it works.
Yeah.
So it's definitely challenging to change that mindset completely. And then the other thing is fear number 3 is the self-fulfilling prophecy, right? We can be so convinced that some food is going to make us binge that we fulfill that prophecy because we're emotionally geared up for it. We believe it. And for me, I know I could use it as an excuse to binge. But it can take a long time, but we can develop that trust in ourselves one bite at a time, like it says before. And then fear number 4 talks about, well, I won't eat very healthy. All I'll eat is junk food all the time. Even if I stop when I'm full and I do all this, all I'll eat is crap. But it's interesting. That's on page 87 at the very bottom. And it says, in case after case, when people are given free choice and access to all varieties of food, after going through the peace process, that's important, right? After going through the peace process, they end up balancing their intake to include most nutritious foods with a smattering of play food. And I think it's interesting because at first everybody turns to the stuff, whatever they think they shouldn't have had all that time, that's what they turn to first. But because of habituation, because of just that's how life is, it loses its draw. And pretty soon you're like, wow, I really do like shrimp and salad and rice and oatmeal and, all the other stuff besides. I won't eat M&Ms forever. Because at some point M&Ms just don't taste that great anymore, And then the 5th fear is lack of self-trust, that you just won't be able to trust yourself. But giving yourself permission is the first step to being able to trust yourself. And think of it like a thread. Every positive experience, you add another thread. And so like this week, how many threads did you add to your experiences?
Well,
You had a lot of good threads this week, right? And you twist those threads together. And then now this week, you're going to get some more threads and you're going to twist those together. And then you're going to twist them with last week's threads. And it's going to get stronger and stronger and stronger until eventually you've got this bridge built between, yourself and this healthy relationship with food. And it's just not so scary anymore. And again, it talks about the more we felt controlled by our parents as children to not trust ourselves with food, the harder it is to kind of do that. The more threads you need to build to kind of build that bridge. The examples that they gave are the people whose parents, made them clean their plate regardless of how full they were, or if they were genuinely hungry and the parents were like, you can't be hungry yet. You ate just a little while ago. So then they start sneaking food because, they are hungry, but then they feel guilty because they're sneaking and they eat more because they don't want it taken away from them. And then you got more guilt. The people who are put on diets as children, that makes it even worse. Luckily, I wasn't encouraged to diet till I was like 18, which was bad enough, but at least it wasn't as a little kid. But this is all about kind of taking back our ownership of this. Okay, so then the last part, and I do kind of want to hurry about it because I want to talk about this faith part, but the 5 steps to making peace with food are on page 89. Number 1, go at your own speed. right? You just take it one piece at a time. Don't put a rule on yourself that you have to have this mastered by January 1st, go at the speed you need to do. It takes time to build trust with yourself, honor your hunger. And then it just goes through the steps. Step 1, pay attention to the foods that are appealing to you. Make a list of them. See what you like, what sounds good. And then put a check mark by the ones that you already eat. And then give your self permission to eat one list off of that food list if something's forbidden. Like I said, I'm hurrying through this because I know you don't have a problem with this. Okay. And then step 4 is actually eating them and actually having that experience and checking in with yourself and how to make sure, like, is this really tasting as good as I thought it did? Or is it the Twinkie that tastes like chemicals that I always imagined was wonderful when it really wasn't? And then I thought, this is interesting. Step 5, make sure that there's enough of it in your house that you can have it as much as you want, right? So if I just go buy a little pint-sized thing of ice cream because I want to make sure to control myself that I can't eat more than that, it can give you that sense of deprivation. If I have 4 of those in the freezer and I know I'm not going to eat 4 of them, then when I get that feeling like, okay, I've had enough, it's easier to stop when you say, I can have that again later if I want it.
Yeah.
Just like the M&Ms, they're still sitting there because we have enough for an army at this point, right? Yeah. And then this chapter is where it says, beware of the I can eat whatever I want as much as I want whenever I feel like it trap. I have fallen in that trap 100 times, easily. This says, eating whatever you want without regard to hunger or fullness is not very satisfying. I like how they point out, it's not about breaking their rules. It's that is not satisfying. You're ignoring part of the process if you're doing that. And it can also cause physical discomfort of many varieties. And so being attuned with your body's satiety, how do you say that? Satiety cues?
Well, my daughter calls it satiety, but I don't.
Satiety?
Right.
I need to look that up because I don't know how to say it right.
Yeah.
Anyway, but listening to your body's satisfaction, right, cues is important. It's an important part of the process. And then they go into habituation, and I'll let you read that part. And then page 92, read the part about can you be addicted to food?
Okay.
Basically, it says there's a lot of reasons why we act the way we do with food, and it goes through what they are, right? Survival of the species, our body's kind of programmed to make sure we eat. I'm going to let you go through that stuff because I want to take a minute to share my screen with you. Let's see. All right. Can you see my food for thought here today?
Yep.
Okay. So there's 2 pages. The first one just kind of reviews what we've just talked about. Gives some questions that you can ask to, if you want to deal with bringing in foods that you don't deal with or that you haven't been dealing with. But this part right here is what's been on my mind a lot more is what does faith have to do with it, right? How do we apply faith in this situation? For me, when I forget, we talked about how sometimes we remember what makes us happy and then we forget. When I forget, I tend to be filled with fear immediately, right? Fear is my go-to. Fear is my, oh crap, I'm never going to be able to do this. This is just too hard. And what if I fail? And, whatever. And we know that quote that fear and faith cannot coexist in the heart of man. They just don't do it at the same time. And so whenever I feel that overwhelming sense of fear, I have to recognize that I'm not helping myself at that moment. I'm actually harming myself it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If I sit around being afraid that I'll never do this, I'm actually at that moment creating the truth that I'll never be able to do this. Yeah. And so it's really tempting to focus on what we don't want. I don't want to be fat. I don't want to overeat. I don't want to. But all we're focused on is the don'ts and what we don't want. And then we wonder why that's what we get. I have a great video of my son when he was learning to ride his bike. He was 6 and we had tried for months and months and months. And he was terrified of riding his bike and he kept falling off and he would storm in the house and he was just getting worse and worse. We were getting kind of worried about him. And we went camping one time and took his bike and we started him up on this hill and lo and behold, he was so cute. It's a long story. He actually woke up that morning and said, Mom, the winds of change are about to blow. We were like, okay, let's grab the video camera. And he came down this hill. He rode his bike for the first time. We were cheering and cheering and cheering. Well, we're camping and it's this huge open area, but there is one big pine tree off the path, right? Not in front of him. Guess where he headed straight for? His pine tree, because he's staring at it, terrified, right? He's staring at this tree like, oh my gosh, if I hit that tree, I'm going to be dead. So immediately, so his bike is veering right for the tree because that's where he's looking. Now, luckily for us, gravity helped him and he did not hit the tree. But that's so much how we are. We're like, okay, I don't want to do this. I don't want to screw up. I don't want to be like this. And the next thing we know, we are geared right towards screwing up and hitting the tree. And so what I put over here is, some thoughts to help you think about, what do you want? Let's not talk about what we don't want. We know that, but let's determine what we do want. And there's a great book by a friend of mine who's in the National Speakers Association with me. His name's Paul H. Jenkins. He's a psychologist. And he tells this great analogy in the book, and I put it on here for you to have. He says, imagine telling the ticket agent at the bus stop, I want to buy a ticket, but I don't want to go to Los Angeles. And I also just don't want to go to New York or San Francisco, or, well, I just don't like it here. Okay, so the ticket agent is staring at you. He's just staring at you over his glasses. He has no idea what ticket to sell you. He only knows what not to sell you because he only knows where you told him you don't want to be. So he doesn't sell you anything and you go nowhere. Get clear about where it is you do want to be. Say where that is. And the ticketing agent, God, natural law, and many other resources that exist to serve you will happily help you get there.
I love that.
I love that too. That was like, I've got to share this with Mitzi. She'll just love this.
Yeah.
We've got to know where we want to go. And so, I had one of those moments this week where I had this fear. And so I just sat down and answered these questions in my journal. What do I want my life to look like today? What do I want? What will that look like? What will it physically look like? What will it emotionally look like? What does that spiritually look like? What will that feel like emotionally, spiritually, physically? What do I need to plan and do to make that vision happen? So if I want today to be the last question, how can I stay focused on that throughout the day? So today, I want this to be a really successful day. I want to go to bed with zero guilt. I want to feel great about my day. I want to have enjoyed all my food and have nothing I regret at the end of the day. I want to be physically stronger today than I was yesterday. I want to focus on positive things today. So then I had to look through it and say, okay, well, what do I need to plan to make this vision happen? Well, I have to plan my dinner. I told you I struggle with that. When I get too busy, I don't plan well. So this morning, I just quickly decided, all right, we're having the chicken sausages in the fridge and Brussels sprouts and brown rice. Okay, done. That's planned. I know what we're going to have, right? When I have to go back and repaint that stupid bathroom today, and I'm frustrated because I don't want to be doing that, and I have more important things to be working on, I've decided I'm going to have something positive on that I'm listening to. I've decided it might be a conference talk. I might download a book on Audible that I can listen to, but I'm going to have something uplifting that I can listen to, because otherwise, I promise you, I will be tempted to come upstairs afterwards and get something really good to eat to make me feel better, right? So instead, I'm going to make myself feel better emotionally that way. I've decided, even though I didn't get up and exercise this morning and it's freezing outside, I am going to take my dog for a walk as soon as we're done with our call, because I know I will feel better when I get that done and it's off my list, and physically I'll enjoy walking with my dog and I'll get warm once we're walking and it'll be fine, right? But I had to plan, okay, here's what I want today, and now how am I going to make that happen? Rather than focusing on all the fears that creep in my head, right? Oh, crap. What if I screw up again? And what if I can never do this? And what if I'm just lying to myself? And, all those stupid things that go in your head. So I put that on there because I want you to really focus on, what do I want? What do I want? And how do I get there? And just take it one day at a time. Sound good?
Yep.
Okay. There's a great scripture I should have put on here that I just read the other day, where Christ tells the people something like, I should have highlighted it and brought it here, but he says something about, take no thought unto the morrow, for sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof. It's basically like he's talking to the disciples that he just set apart in America, and he's sending them to teach the people. And he says, don't worry about what you're going to eat. Don't worry about what you're going to wear. Just, I'll take care of you. And he goes through, like the flowers are clothed more beautifully than Solomon's temple was, and God can take care of you. And that's what he says. Take no